Welcome to Mat Time Podcast. We are here to cover UFC 250 this weekend. I'm here with Brad. Main eventer this weekend, we have Amanda Nunes, double champ, defending her featherweight championship against Felicia Spencer, a very live dog in that fight. A lot of good fights in this card, but me and Brad are going to jump right into this main event. So, Brad, we have, the most dominant women's champion in history, Amanda Nunes, who seems like she is breaking accolade after accolade, doing amazing things for the sport. And we're getting to the point where it seems like we're running out of competition for her. She's beaten Ronda. She's beaten Holly. She's beaten Cyborg. She beat Cyborg for the championship. So it becomes a thing. We're maybe waiting on the new breed of talent to come through. And Felicia Spencer, she is getting some hype as a live dog in this fight. I don't know where I stand as far as her chances in this fight, but what do you think of Felicia Spencer and her chances this weekend?
I mean, Felicia Spencer has as good a shot as anybody has against Amanda Nunes, which is as backhanded as a compliment as you can give somebody, I suppose. We haven't seen Amanda Nunes look like she has any weaknesses or any sort of chink in her armor at all. And Felicia Spencer's tough. She went the distance with Cyborg. But, I mean, Amanda Nunes has just been so dominant. I don't see much of a challenge for her here, and I don't see what much is left for her unless she wants to just keep fighting. There may not. She's already previously spoken of retiring. This may be we may be getting to the end here, but something important to consider is that she's now defending both of her titles. A lot of people have been champ and then dropped one, dropped both, defended neither. She's actually defending both of her titles, and that's something to marvel at and be. I mean, I'm incredibly impressed by it.
Yeah, this featherweight championship, it's very confusing where we're at with this because, there is no UFC featherweight division, in the women's division. It seems like they're just next woman up and taking a lot of women from bantamweight and seeing if they want to come up. So what you're saying about Amanda Nunes possibly retiring, that makes things even more dicey because you have this division that's not even established. You have a champion that might be on her way out after complete dominance. So what does the UFC do with this division after this weekend? Odds are Amanda Nunes wins. So what do we do from there?
Well, I mean, this was the Cyborg division at first. It was the division they put together because Cyborg needed a belt for Cyborg to justify what they were paying for Cyborg, honestly. And then, things never really went the way they wanted them to. Cyborg got the belt for a little bit, but she pulled out of the first fight, and you got the Holly Holm Jermaine Durandamy Jesus fight, which all sorts of controversial, and you got GDR who vacated that belt, and then Cyborg picks it up and then loses it to Amanda. And if you go to UFC.com, there's no featherweight rankings for women. There's not. You're like you said, there's no division. This was a showcase division for Cyborg, and it really has kind of outlived its purpose unless they actually build a division.
Yeah, it's like we have maybe 4 established women that are actually UFC featherweights. You have Nunes, you have Spencer, you have Megan Anderson, and you had, Cyborg when she was there, but, it seems like she's all but retired. She didn't officially say it, but
well, she went with Bellator, didn't she?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm eager to see when, the world comes back to normal, her fighting in Bellator. But when we get back to the matchup, I see people on Twitter and such trying to hype this matchup up because of just the the sheer matchup when it comes to Felicia Spencer's chin and her ability to take a punch, and a lot of people are hyping up this going the distance with Cyborg, but it becomes a matter of what is she going to do to Amanda Nunes, because we can talk all day. I know what we do. We try to see all the possible outcomes. We don't look at champions like they're invincible because we get proven wrong. But what does Felicia Spencer offer that can beat Amanda Nunes? I mean, sure, she submitted Megan Anderson. I mean, sure, kind of impressive, but Megan Anderson is not Amanda Nunes and vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. It's difficult to see any sort of resistance that she could put up based on what we've seen from her in the past compared to what we've seen Amanda do in the past. It isn't the strongest headliner, to be quite honest, because of the one-sided nature of the fight. But I mean, we've seen other fights. We usually have a little bit more of an inkling of an upset when it's going to come, when the major upsets come. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to move to what I'm really interested in? Is we've got a little bantamweight tournament kind of
It's
set
exactly what I
up
was
here.
thinking. Yeah. So it's interesting with the way the world is. It seems like these UFC fight cards are getting put together on a week, 2 weeks notice at most, because not even a few weeks ago, a lot of people were writing this card off, like weren't interested in it at all. We were talking about it. People thought that all of the talent, all the star power got put on the first few cards back from the pandemic break. But we get, like you said, all these very, very enticing bantamweight matchups. The first one we have, Cody Garbrandt making his return after his 3-fight skid, going against Rafael Assunção. There's so many questions there. When Cody Garbrandt's at his best, he is one of the best fighters in the world. We saw that against Dominic Cruz. We even saw it in shades of the TJ Dillashaw fight. But what do you think, man? It's so hard for me to think of what's going to happen against a stud like Assunção. Do we see the old Garbrandt? I hope so, but do we?
Um, that is the question: is if we see the old Garbrandt. The old Garbrandt is an incredibly intelligent fighter who makes the right decisions and explodes at the correct time. And then the bad of Garbrandt is he just lets it all go and brawls. And you saw both sides of that in the first TJ fight. In the first round, he landed on TJ and then let it all go. And I saw a clip of that fight, and he ran into the same right hand 3 times in a row. TJ reset, threw it again, reset, threw it again, and dropped him.
Dude, I remember when I watched that fight live, I even said it out loud. I was at Wild Wings, and I'm like, oh no, because I saw it coming a mile away that was going to happen, because you saw TJ was calculating and Garbrandt was like bull with the horns mode. You know what I mean?
But then we saw Garbrandt at his peak against Cruz, where he not only outmaneuvered Cruz, he was able to intelligently counter and strike with Cruz to win the bantamweight title in one of the most impressive runs we've seen, from unranked to a champion in 12 months or 14 months total, something like that.
Yeah, so I had to be reminded of that title run by Cody Garbrandt, and UFC's been posting a lot of videos of his knockouts on his rise up, and the one that gets played a lot is his knockout of Thomas Almeida, and it made me think back to the mindset we had after that fight, because a lot of people had Thomas Almeida as one of their top prospects. Of people were already putting the belt on him, and Garbrandt went out and put his lights out in a matter of, I think, like 3 minutes or something like that. It seemed like he was the perfect controlled chaos, and he was going to run through everybody. And, we get to the Dillashaw fights after the, phenomenal Cruz fight, maybe the best performance by a single fighter ever. But we get to the Dillashaw fights, and we know some of the reasons why he was emotional. He was crazy in those fights because of the history with Dillashaw, the complicated history with Dillashaw. You saw the Ultimate Fighter. You saw everything that unfolded with them, with the alpha male gym. But that you have some kind of justification for that. But then he goes against Pedro Munoz on a 2-fight losing streak, and he does somewhat of the same thing. And, there was no history with Pedro Munoz. So it raises even more questions. Is this the Garbrandt that we get now? obviously he's taken a long layoff since that fight, and that's where all the questions come in. That's where all the intrigue comes in. Is are we going to see a reinvented Cody Garbrandt?
And I think the layoff is probably to his benefit. Um, if Cody Garbrandt comes back focused, ready to fight, who did I hear he was training with? Now I can't remember. But he's with a different camp. And I mean, Asuncau's on a skid of his own, coming off of a loss to Sandhagen, and who was the other? He was submitted. He was submitted by somebody else.
That is a good question. Let me look that up.
He was submitted by Moraes. That's who it was.
Yeah, Marlon. Yeah, I remember that fight now. Yeah, because a rematch with Marlon Moraes that a lot of people thought Moraes won the first one, and then they run it back, and Moraes took all the question out of people's minds. But I still put Asuncao at the top of that division. Maybe not top 2, top 3, but he definitely is a perennial contender. And it's so many questions. I think it makes it such a good fight. There's so many questions to be answered.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have, related to that fight, Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen, also at bantamweight. Also, possibly the winner could be the number 1 contender when we get the results of the Petr Yan Jose Aldo fight.
I mean, if I had to be completely honest, going to the Petr Yan Jose Aldo fight, I mean, that's not the fight I want. I think they kind of dropped the ball by not having Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. I don't know why they're not doing this fight. But as far as entertainment is concerned, I do think Petr Yan versus Jose Aldo will deliver. I am glad that Aljamain's stepping back in the cage. He's definitely one of my top 2 favorite fighters. Yeah, it's bittersweet because I think they're both great matchups, but I just feel like they dropped the ball on the right matchup.
Yeah, to me, it's a little bittersweet that Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen are only fighting for 3 rounds. They're not, if not a belt, they should at least be fighting for 5 rounds. But yeah, they did have a difficult situation at bantamweight with the belt being vacated, and you would have thought it would have been Marlon Moraes instead of Jose Aldo, with Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen. But the Rafael Asuncao Cody Garbrandt fight really kind of threw a curveball in, because the winner of that could put themselves into title contention. I don't know, that depending on how Garbrandt looks, he could maybe make a push for a title shot. And then you've also got the winner of Sterling or Sandhagen. You've kind of got a weird little round robin thing going.
Yeah, I think the UFC always kind of wants that because for years fans have always wanted like a tournament, like we have a definitive number 1 contender. But the problem with that is after you establish a clear contender, you kind of left with a bunch of other guys that were on the losing end of it, and we have no contender after that fight. So it's something the UFC always wants to keep, like a cycle of guys ready for title fights. And I think that's what they're going for here. And, we were talking about Cody Garbrandt's rise to the top of the division. I'm looking at Corey Sandhagen, man. He came out of nowhere. He really did. He has 5 fights in the UFC, and it seems like he showed up yesterday. And the names he has on his list already, I mean, beating John Lineker for one, and one of the fights that comes – yeah, and then before that he fought Yuri Alcantara. I'm pretty sure he's Sandhagen's bones are made out of jelly, because Alcantara had him in a deep armbar for at least 90 seconds, and he just seemed unaffected. And he came out and beat the hell out of him, got the TKO finish. But you would think, man, that this, if he beats Aljamain Sterling, which I hope he doesn't, because I mean, straightforward, I think Aljamain Sterling, and I want Aljamain Sterling to be champion. But if Sandhagen does win this fight, that is a hell of a resume in such a short window of time.
Right. That would be very similar to Garbrandt's run. And to me, I find Sandahagen I might be my pick, and I'm with you. I feel like Aljo's deserved a title fight already, and he could be at the top of the division, and I wouldn't be upset to see him win. But I think Sandahagen might beat Sterling, he might beat Jan. So I don't know. Sandahagen is kind of my dark horse in the division at the moment.
Yeah, I was gonna say that he definitely is the dark horse because not a lot of people are putting respect on his name. He doesn't have, a big social media following. It seems like the hardcore fans know who he is, but not a lot of the casuals, yeah, just the overall MMA fan base. It
Hmm.
seems like it's going to take a while for him to get some respect on his name, but that doesn't matter when you get in the cage.
Yeah, right. After that, we've got Neil Magny against Anthony Rocco Martin at welterweight. I like watching Neil Magny fight. Constant movement, constant pressure, never tired. Uh, Even in his losses, like again, the Damian Maya fight sticks out to me just because of the heart and will and fight he put into it. Even though fighting Damian Maya is like, well, it's like fighting Damian Maya.
He's such a cool guy to watch, man. I remember his run back in 2014. I think he set the most wins in a calendar year. He showed what you can build when you have cardio and discipline to learn technique. Like he built upon that, and he definitely learned some finishing ability on the way because he doesn't have nowhere anywhere near the hardest punches and kicks in the world. He's not the super strongest guy in the weight class. He's tall, he's lanky, and he's got cardio and volume for days. And he is definitely a unique guy to watch because he's not like any other welterweight. But my criticism, if I have any, with Neil Magny, he always seems to struggle against specialists. Where you look at his losses, and he has a loss to Damian Maya, who's a jiu-jitsu specialist, and he dominated him on the ground. And you look at more recently Lorenz Larkin. I know that was a little while ago, but Lorenz Larkin is pretty close to a lethal striking specialist, and he absolutely mopped the floor with Neil Magny. But we look at this matchup with Rocco Martin, I think we kind of get like a mirror matchup, if you will. It's like with Martin recently, especially going up to welterweight, his conditioning has gotten so much better. Where it seems like when fighters have bad conditioning, they always have bad conditioning. And Martin, he started off with very suspect conditioning, but has seemed to fix it over the span of his last 3 or 4 fights. It's like he's changed his identity.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off that win on Sergio Moraes. And then before that, he had fought Damian Maya, I believe, which, yeah, he fought Damian Maya, which goes as well as fighting Damian Maya goes for most people. But
Did he get
he,
backpacked in that fight?
Damian Maya fight, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Damian Maya choked him. I'm, you know, I think Neil Magny went the distance with Maya, and Martin was finished by Maya.
I think it's vice versa. I'm looking at it. It looks like
Oh yeah,
Maya
Martin.
and Martin went to a majority decision,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think Magny got RNC'd by
You could be right.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, both guys absolute vets in the game. Magny's had more fights than I can count. It's an extremely interesting matchup. I think it's one of those that could be like a sleeper fight of the night. I know we have all these exciting bantamweight matchups, but you know, it's hard to pick, but I would lean more towards Neil Magny figuring it out because, like I said, it seems like he always struggles against specialists, but uh, Martin seems like one of those well-rounded volume guys. I think Magny can match that and outpace him and beat him.
I would tend to agree. Magny would probably be able to outpace him, put damage on him, outpoint him, and probably take a decision. But if we see the progression that we've seen from Anthony Rocco Martin or Tony Martin or whatever you're supposed to call him,
That was one of
Uh,
the more confusing name changes. He called himself Tony Martin, and then at the same time of growing sideburns, he called himself Anthony Rocco Martin. I didn't know what that was all about, but
yeah.
here we are.
Uh, I mean, I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. It's your name. I don't care. Uh, but I think he might have a little bit more. If he has an edge, it's in the power department. You know what I mean? He's got a little bit more of a zip and pop to his punches. And if he can get ahead and do some damage, maybe do some body work, I could see him putting Magny away. It's one of those things that you can also see Magny just doing what he does, getting on his bike, racking up points, scoring, hitting and moving. But it's like you said, it's a very close fight. It's hard to pick. Um, do you have anything else, or would you want to go to Eddie Wineland and Sean O'Malley?
We move on to Ben Askren's oldest rebel son, Sugar Sean O'Malley. One of my top prospects in the UFC, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. I think this kid has unlimited potential. I think he could easily be champion in this bantamweight division one day. I think he has unlimited star power potential of being one of the big pay-per-view draws in this company. But if we just stick to the fighting side of it, I think he's on a slow rise, and I think he even admits that he's not fighting the top guys quite yet. He's making a slow climb,
Mm-hmm.
and I think against a guy like Eddie Wineland, he can really shine.
Yeah, I think Eddie Wineland presents an interesting challenge just because of the way Eddie Wineland fights. He has a interesting movement style, and it's really different from a lot of other people. If you remember how well he was doing against Barao before
Yeah,
his movement actually worked against him, and he ducked right into that spinning back kick. But it presents an interesting challenge, one that I feel like Sean O'Malley, as an intelligent fighter as he is, will be able to rise to, and we'll be able to see him make his way up and through the division. I think you're right. He could be champ by the end of next year, with the way he's rising and the state of the division. But he's also stated on, and I want to know what you think about this, Nick. He stated on the Luke Thomas show that if the UFC wants to pay him what they're paying him now, then he's fine with just fighting just another guy, just another guy. If they want him to fight better guys, they need to pay him more. And that's also sort of segues into the John Jones situation. If we can talk about both of those real quick.
yeah. So obviously, the last podcast, I shared my feelings as far as the approach that the UFC brass and Dana White seem to be taking to fighter pay. Well, one of Dana White's favorite approaches seems to be of twisting people's words and straight up lying about what people said, which is very irritating. Because, I mean, Brad, if I had to ask you who you believe more between John Jones and Dana White in this situation, not that I'm the biggest John Jones fan in the world, but when you hear both sides of the stories of like what each of them said and what John really asked for, who do you really believe in that situation?
Dana White has lied to me more than anyone else I've ever had a sort of relationship with or met online or anything. He just will stretch the truth, which is part of his job, is to stretch the truth. So I tend to lean in general on the side of the worker in labor disputes. So
Yeah.
I gotta say, John's probably not being 100% forthright either. But when Dana's questioned about it, his rebuttal is, "Why would I lie?" Well, there's a ton of reasons for you to lie. Well, yeah, but why would I lie? It's like, well, you've lied to us a ton of times before. But his response is just, "Why would I lie?" It's like, well, we have documents that show that UFC pays 16 to 18% of its revenue annually out to fighters, and you claim USADA is part of that. But why would you lie about not paying your fighters?
Yeah, I hope that guys like John Jones, because you would hope that a guy like John Jones is what is needed for starting a serious conversation about that, because it seems like things have died down as far as that is concerned. We haven't talked about fighter pay and how unjust it is in a long time in the sport, where I think a lot of fighters have gone quiet. And when a guy like John Jones speaks out, I see lower level fighters that have a lot to lose, trying to stick up for the UFC. And to name drop one, I saw Kevin Holland sticking up for the UFC, and I just don't see how that helps him in the long run. I understand he like the idea of being a company guy and sticking up, but fighters need to band together when it comes to that kind of thing.
I tend to agree. A fighters association, just like any other major sport, has an athletes association, and a collective bargaining agreement. Dana White still refers to himself as fighters' bosses, which he is unequivocally not. They are partners, they're business partners, because each fighter is an independent contractor.
Yeah, the thing that bugs me is like when it comes to they're independent contractors when it's convenient for the UFC, and they're employees when it's convenient for the UFC. Because I mean, did fighters have much of a say on the Reebok deal? How much they get paid from the Reebok deal? I see you shaking your head no, and that's the thing. It's like it's so convenient for him to drop that line, and there definitely needs to be a reform, and it starts with guys like John Jones. And I appreciate a young guy. I think Sean O'Malley's 25 years old. If he's barely even cracked the top 15, and he's already taken a stance like that, it comes back to I know Zach has made this point many times about like the best fighters are in the UFC, but when we have a competitor like Bellator that pays as well as they do, I cannot blame somebody for going there, because at the end of the day, yes, it's about legacy. Yes, it's about being the best in the world. But if a company is not willing to pay you like the best in the world, then I don't blame you for going elsewhere.
I agree. So let's wrap up here. I'm just going to start at the very beginning of the card and work my way up, and you just give me your pick real quick, okay? And we'll wrap up. So first fight of the night is Evan Dunham versus Herbert Burns. Gilbert Burns' little brother. What do you think?
Well, if I had to be honest, I haven't seen much of Gilbert's brother Herbert. If I would assume that he does have quite a few fights under his belt to be fighting in the UFC against a veteran like Evan Dunham. If he is anything like his brother recently, then I think it stands a really good chance, and we're going to see. Where is it that Gilbert Burns is training these days? Is it well, I know Black Zillions got disbanded, but like
MMA Masters or something like that in
Florida. Yeah, I don't even know, but under the tutelage of his brother and all the great people that train him, we will see. We'll see if he's ready just yet. But if I had to throw a guess out there, I think Burns gets done.
All right, let's try to do the rest of them actually quick.
Yeah.
Alonzo Menafield and Devin Clark.
I go with Devin Clark.
Really? I'm on Menafield there.
Okay.
Formiga, Alex Perez.
It's a tough one. I'll go Formiga. He's a vet.
I'm on Formiga because he's a vet as well. I have no idea who Charles Bird or Maki Pitolo are. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Neither do I.
Finishing up the preliminary card, we have Cody Stamann versus Brian Kelleher. Cody Stamann seems to be more on his way up through the featherweight division. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, Kelleher has definitely gotten some momentum recently, but he's been up and down. But I will go with him in this fight. It's a tough one to pick, but I go with Kelleher.
Yeah, I'm on Stamann there. We have a middleweight contest: Ian Heinisch versus Gerald Meerschaert. It's got a hard name to say. I think Heinisch was on a nice run, and he who did he lose to recently?
Derek Brunson was one.
Was it Brunson that he just lost to recently?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if he had one more recently.
No, it was just the Brunson loss. And then he came back against he lost to Akhmedov as well. So he's on a 2-fight skid, but he looked really good on his run up, and I think he could continue that against Meerschaert.
Yeah. I look at Mearshart. Lost to Eric Anders. I don't really knock him for that, but a win against Deron Wynn. I'm not big on Deron Wynn, if I had to be honest. Heinich, at his best, he seems to be a scary type of matchup for people, and that's a very good cardio wrestler. Very big in size. I'll go with him in this fight.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then the final fight on the prelims is one that a lot of people are looking forward to. It's Alex Caceres against Ben Askren's youngest son, Chase Hooper.
The good son, the one that follows the rules and gets home by 8 p.m. and is always goes to bed on time. I'm really big on Chase Hooper. I think I think he'll definitely get that done against Caceres, the bantamweight gatekeeper.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that we is that featherweight, but I am really hoping we see Chase Hooper rise to the challenge again, like we have for all his fights. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the card, and that'll wrap up our podcast for UFC 250. For Brock and Zach, who are busy, and Nick and Max, I'm Brad, and we will see you on the mats.